fast forward to the 21st century, we see the advancement of technology in terms of cell phones and laptops and video games and just a range of electronic devices. And coming out of Congo was critical for that. By the same token, as we look at today, the green energy transition, artificial intelligence industry, the pursuit on the part of the world really to mitigate the climate crisis by ushering in energy transition. We see Congo's cobalt is indispensable because this energy transition is powered by batteries, and cobalt is a key ingredient in batteries. So if you just last 500 years of Africa's Maafa, we see that Congo's minerals has been central to powering the advancement of the Western world, and concomitant with that is the destruction of the African peoples that goes hand in glove with this advancement. So, you know, at the dawn of the 20th century, European geologists said Congo was a geological scandal. And the reason why they said it is because there's so much wealth, so many minerals packed into this one geographic space. It has minerals and metals for almost all the elements on the periodic chart. So it is just indispensable to a range of Western industries. And often overlooked, it's its centrality to the military industry, right? Where you have the United States in 1982, the Office of Management Budget issued its cobalt policy, where it talked about cobalt being central to the national security of the United States and the necessity to stockpile cobalt. Where they're going to get the cobalt from is Congo, because U.S. doesn't produce cobalt, right? Look at, there's Ali Missouri, some of you may remember him, from the Africans. He had a series called The Africans, wrote a book called Africans. He noted in the 1980s that if Congo was to stop, and then Zaire was to stop the export of its cobalt, it would ground the entire NATO flotilla, right? So we see centrality of Congo's minerals primarily to the West military industry, and really secondary to the technology, auto, electronics, aerospace, and the rest.
I mean, wow, that was a lot, especially how you talk about like the militarism and the how it is a part of like Western expansion and imperialism and everything. Diallo, do you have anything to piggyback like what Maurice was kind of talking about?
Yeah, I appreciate the very dense and completely accurate assessment of the brother. The reality is for Africans in the Congo and throughout the African continent and the African diaspora, Africa's wealth has been a blessing for the Western world and a curse for Africa. And Congo specifically shows the contradiction and realities of capitalism, that simply having resources and having wealth does not translate to riches. And the wealth of one's land and even the health of the economy has no correlation to the health and well-being of the people who are supposedly to possess that wealth. So, I mean, as he stated, that it's not a relatively new, everyone's aware of the coltan and the expanding wireless and internet economy, the green economy. But as he said, it goes back to the 1500 to King Leopold and rubber. So throughout, although Congo has been a supplier and central to the industrial development in the what are we on our fourth industrial revolution, Africa as a continent and Congo as a nation has not profited, but they have suffered. And Africa's vulnerability and inability, or I would even argue sometimes unwillingness to reject capitalism and to subvert neo-colonial agendas against our continent, our people, in many of our times attempts to align ourselves or to accommodate agendas of exploitation, of resource extraction, continue to perpetuate this. I kind of call this atrocity hopping, because the conversations and what we're talking about could be going on for centuries, going back from whether it's the founding of the LLCs and British East India Company, all the way up to Apple Corp and Alphabet Corp. All of the titles, the names, even the technology changes, but the exploitation and lack of compensation for the people remain the same. And then when you go, we're not just speaking about the mineral wealth, the ecological destruction of the biodiversity, the mass extinction of animals and plant life, the contamination, the irreversible contamination of the soil that can never be reclaimed, is also a major factor. The eco destruction, and they're literally destroying the life sustaining capacity of the land and causing a collapse of all complex biomes and complex ecosystems. It is not, it goes beyond a crime against humanity, because all living systems, all biological life forms are being threatened and harmed and contaminated. Dioxin contamination, lead contamination, mercury contamination, because it's not just they're stealing the wealth, the extraction process is leaving such a destructive scar on the continent. And as I say all the time, biological and chemical contamination doesn't recognize borders. A problem that affects everyone. And it's not just the adjacent nation, but the jet stream carries contaminations into the ocean and across ocean lineages. So the suffering, the exploitation and destruction of the Congo is really the linchpin for global ecological collapse. There is no sanctuary for anyone escaping the escalating atrocities in the Congo, and there is no one who isn't playing a role, in the exploitation and our failures to bring justice to the Congo, which will reverberate to justice across the continent and for all oppressed and colonized people across the world. So Congo is central to everyone, even if you are not on the African continent, or you are not an African or a Black person in the world.
Wow. Thank you guys both for that. Sorry. That was amazing. How does this type of advancement, I think I touched on this. I think you guys touched on this question of like, how does this type of like advancement in technology and increase in wealth impact us here in the United States? And how does it impact our conditions, like when it comes to like surveillance and militarism here? You can decide if you guys want to touch on that. Yeah.
Well, there's a myth in Western capitalism and under white hegemony that technology is evidence of civilization and technology is evidence of human advancement, when all technology does is make humans more efficient in what they were always doing. Technology does not civilize. So whether you have a brute with a wooden club or a brute with a laser gun or a satellite guided drone, the brutality and inhumanity is consistent. It just becomes more efficient machine of exploitation, enslavement, and murder. So these technological advancements that we enjoy can render us numb to the savage underbelly of technology. We have self-driving cars, we have GPS tracking, we can walk into our homes and speak to a artificial intelligence to set the temperature, to start the oven, to cook dinner, and all of these comforts. But what's ironic is the same brutality that was allowed for the comfort of the plantation master and the plantation mistress. The same brutality that allowed for the comforts of the railroad barons, the genocide that was at the root of laying down the railroads and establishing the DuPonts, the Rockefellers, and all of these other dynasties. These people are dressed in the finest clothes, they drink the finest wines, they eat off of crystal and with gold utensils. But all of that was done through mutilation, mass murder, destruction. And what capitalism in its technology has been able to do is establish what is called a sterilizing distance, meaning that the further you are away from the atrocities that create your comfort, that is called the sterilizing distance. So you literally had people profiting from chattel slavery that never touched a slave, never saw a slave. People, investing on Wall Street in cotton, agricultural investment, people investing in the rail lines and the slaughter of the indigenous people. So with all of this technology, the cornerstone of capitalism and Western power is still enslavement. And they have these obscene terms, like they call it artisanal mining. When they have children with no training, no protective equipment, and really no mandate or legal right to even extract the minerals. But they have traders, sellouts, Uncle Toms, whatever you want to call them, who exploit their own people for short-term profit, exploit their own land for their own personal gain. And those sick, broken, exploited children, we don't see, hear, or think about when we purchase the new iPhone or we see some celebrity, promoting. I just saw, I think it was Holly Berry, I don't know, Zendaya, somebody who just has a new commercial promoting the metallic orange iPhone 16 or some weird shit like that. And that is directly the blood of our people, not even the blood of our ancestors. We're talking about reparations for past crimes, and which bothers me somewhat when we talk about post-traumatic, we haven't gotten past any of this. The only thing that the system has been able to do is create a sterilizing distance between the people who profit from the atrocities and the people who suffer the atrocities to create this level of comfort. There isn't anything, whether I have a son that's going off to college next year, and I have to secure certain supplies and materials for him. And it all comes as a direct result of hyper exploitation of individuals and ecosystems that is not sustainable. So technology confuses us. Technology distorts our perception. And we think that, wow, look how far humanity has come. When the average frontline person, the average person in the mines, the average person in the sweatshops, the average person that's working on the mariners, even the merchant marines loading the ships, the average person who's cutting down the Amazonian rainforest to grow soybeans to feed cattle, it's all interconnected. It's still a system based on slavery, the enslavement, the forced labor, and non or undercompensation of labors. But because we have all of this technology, all of these gadgets, we are so distant and separated from it that we think that there's progress when there are more people enslaved today than there was in 20. There are more people that can be defined as enslaved, interned, exploited labor in 2025 than there was in 1825. So I wish we would get over the distractions and illusions that technological advances have given us, because we literally live in a system of high-tech barbarism. Digital, high-tech, hyper-efficient, and the only thing technology has done under capitalism is make the enslavement and exploitation more efficient and given it better coverage. in terms of not coverage in terms of exposure, but better coverage in terms of we don't have to look at the visceral violence that sustains our comfort in our lifestyle.
Just a few quick points to complement what Diallo just shared. One of the aims of Friends of Congo is to raise global consciousness about what's transpiring in the heart of the continent. And central to that is popular education. And popular education, we have centers on making the connection between the end user and the source of those resources that are exploited. And what is particularly noteworthy, a few things are particularly noteworthy, and Diallo repeated it several times, and that's the systemic nature of things, the structural nature of things. It's vital that in our assessment or analysis that we look at things systemically, right? Not just as an individual company or even individual sector, right? We're talking about capitalism, talking about imperialism, talking about neocolonialism. And looking at it systemically, we see, just for example, that at the top of the supply chain, right, here in the United States, where all these gadgets are utilized by, almost everybody, right? We still have, right, the server farms in Mississippi, in Alabama, that are devastating Black and poor communities, right? This is at the top of the supply chain. The top of the supply chain is made possible by those children digging in the mines in the Congo, right? So in our popular education, in our political education, it's vital for us to make that connection. In fact, it breathes life into what Malcolm shared in 1964 at one of the early meetings of the Organization of Afro-American Unity. He was, Malcolm almost always talked about the Congo, Lumumba, and he was educating folks in Harlem through films and presentations around the Congo. One brother in the audience said, hey man, we're catching hell right here in Harlem. Why are we focusing on the Congo, right? And Malcolm retorted, as he, in his own style, and said, this brother speaking out of the side of his mouth, it's important for him to know, as long as we think we're gonna get Mississippi straight, before we get Congo straight, we'll never get Mississippi straight. So he's talking about the connections and the systemic nature of white supremacy, the systemic nature of capitalism, systemic nature of imperialism. So just in our framing and our approach to, as far as it relates to the diagnosis, because this is just the diagnosis, right? And we've laid out all the problems and the systemic and structural nature of the problems, then, what are the prescriptions, right? Which I'm sure we'll get into in terms of responding to prescriptions to this system that has ravaged our people, both at home and abroad. So look forward to sharing more on it as you get to the questions. I don't want to preempt your questions, but sharing more around the prescriptions for this dire, I guess in the voice of Mos Def, dire diagnosis, right?
Yeah, thank you guys so much for that. I appreciate that. So Congo has one of the greatest rainforests. How does this consistent exploitation and violence affect that rainforest?
I'm trying to unmute my mic, sorry. Hello?
Yes.
Okay. Here's the thing about rainforest, because we look at rainforest and see that they're so lush and green and the biodiversity, highest biodiversity. But what has been found by environmentalists and geologists is that rainforests have relatively low and poor, they have relatively low soil nutrients and low soil quality, ironically. So when rainforests are cut or disrupted, because as vast and powerful as the forests appear, they're quite delicate ecosystems. So once you lose the rainforest, it's all but impossible to gain them back. And they are also understanding with global warming that and the irregular and disrupted weather patterns, that the soil erosion is rapidly, the what they call salinization of fresh water, which means encroachment of ocean water into freshwater sources. All that to say is, once we lose the rainforest, it can't be replanted. It can't be recreated within generations. It took millennia, eons for that ecosystem to evolve and develop. And it's being destroyed in 1 or 2 human generations, and it can never be regained. Um, and what's more ironic about that is you have preservationists. Europeans come from the West to instruct Africans on how to interact and how to preserve ecosystems, as they have been the primary benefactors of the destruction and exploitation of Africa's ecosystem. And then they come into Africa and tell them, well, you can't develop, you can't mine coal or build coal plants, you can't clear cut for agriculture or extract lumber. So you're dealing with this contradiction that the people who profited from the exploitation of Congo's forest and pristine ecosystem are telling those who are in poverty and desperation that they are the bad actors for seeking. I can't hear you. I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Go ahead. It was my internet. Sorry.
Oh, so I have a lot of issues because I advocate for ecological preservation, ecological restoration, reduce carbon emissions, personal responsibility, everything from cycling, from renewable energy sources, vegan diet, all the green initiatives that I come across that I can implement in my life and advocate for locally and abroad. But I also understand that the imperialistic nature of the green movement and the ecology movement, when the source of Congo's ecological destruction, clear cutting of the rainforest, it's happening in the Congo, but it's provoked in Western Europe, in UK, it's provoked in France, it's provoked in the Pentagon and the US State Department. So it's ironic that if you want to help preserve Congo, you should be taking the fight to the Western power centers. You should be taking the fight to the multinational corporations, to the Canadian mining companies. That's where the fight is. It's not going to the people in the Congo trying to extract or eke out a living from the forest, because Africans know better than anybody how to preserve and sustain and cultivate Africa's ecosystem. But because of external pressure and just the unjust nature of resource extraction and wealth distribution, Africans are faulted. You know, you have Africans literally gunning each other down over ivory. African people are hacking each other to death over rhino horns. African poachers and African protectors paid by and armed by Western interest, good white people, air quotes, are paying Africans to slaughter each other to protect the guerrillas. So Africans are still, as Del Jones would say, hacking each other to death over Western interest. So it is a great tragedy. But one thing I would say, because that anybody that is concerned with Africa's forests, rainforests, or Africa's ecosystems, the Congo's ecosystem, the problem does not start in Africa, and the problem cannot be solved in Africa. If you really want to preserve, you're not about, lecturing Africans about the value of biodiversity. It's about literally dismantling the infrastructure for capitalism and white hegemony. And if you're not anti-capitalist, and if you're not an opponent standing and living in opposition to global white hegemony, then nothing else you do, everything else you do is purely cosmetic.
Thank you so much. Is there something that you want to add to that, Maurice?
So we can do the entire discussion around Congo's rainforest, right? Just a few basics around it that I think are important without getting too much into it. It's kind of interesting. We talked about the centrality to Congo's minerals to technology, right? It's really interesting because if you look at two dominant phenomena of our time in terms of discourse and activism, research, and just concern, on the one hand, you have the climate crisis, right? The climate emergency. And then on the other hand, you have the so-called green energy transition, which is supposed to mitigate the climate crisis, right? That's the rationale. That's the argument that's put forward. And we know where Congo sits as it relates to the so-called green energy transition. It's a transition that's powered by batteries, right? And a key ingredient in the batteries, cobalt, which Congo produces 70%. Well, I shouldn't say Congo. The companies in Congo produce the world's cobalt. Congo doesn't produce it, right? Congolese people don't produce it. The Congolese government don't do it. The corporations in the Congo, right? The global corporations produce 70% of the world's cobalt. So it's indispensable to this energy transition, right? These transitional minerals that are found in the Congo. Now, the rainforest, Congo is a part of the second largest rainforest in the world, the Congo Basin, right? Often referred to as the second lung of the world. The Democratic Republic of Congo itself occupies a little over 60% of the Congo Basin rainforest, right? Now, the Congo Basin rainforest, although the second largest in the world, it sequesters more carbon than the Amazon and Borneo combined, right? So it puts the Congo Basin front and center when we talk about combating the climate crisis or the climate emergency, right? In addition to that, you have in the Congo Basin, the largest tropical peatlands in the world, right? They all talked about the years that it takes. Well, you have an area in the Congo the size of the country of England, that is where foliage, soil sediment is accumulated for thousands of years and has trapped carbon in the soil. And if that carbon is released in the atmosphere that we have in the Congo peatlands, it can produce pollution to the same extent that you get from the United States for about 20 years of the burning of fossil fuels, right? So that's how central the peatlands are. And it is left to the traditional, I shouldn't say left to, but the folks who have lived there for thousands of years, where for them, it's not just a question of preservation or protection of the rainforest. The rainforest is their way of life, their fundamental part of their spiritual system. It is their culture, their heritage. It's the grocery store, the medicine, the pharmacy, right? We, Friends of the Congo, we work with a coalition of organizations in the Congo made up of indigenous leaders, and they call it Basanja, Basandja. It's a Topoke word. And they chose the word Basanja because Basanja is a traditional code of ethic that governs how human beings live, right, in concert with all living entities, the ocean, the trees, the waters, the rocks, you name it. So there's a certain balance that's firmly embedded in the culture, right? Now, this is a space that's often referred to as the heart of darkness. But you see among the indigenous community, humane philosophies and belief systems that can heal the world. And if there were to be the dominant form of ethic and practice, which we find among indigenous people throughout the globe, really, right? But what you have is a situation where as Diallo talked about, you have these not only the companies But you have these conservation entities that come in and say, we want to preserve or conserve the rainforest, right? The term that they apply to them are scholars like our sister Abby Senye from Clemson University is fortress conservation, right? This is the conservation that's rooted in Teddy Roosevelt conservation. Teddy Roosevelt was a major champion of conservation. Yellowstone Park, where if we know anything about how this is where the conservation system began here in the United States, promoted by Roosevelt, and then it was exported to Africa. And what it entails is a top-down system that comes in and say, we're going to preserve the environment, conserve the environment. You have the World Wildlife Fund and these other major institutions. But in doing that, what they do is they displace the local community, the indigenous community, the Mbuti, the Twa, the so-called Pygmy, right? Who are the custodians of the land, the best protectors of the land, just by virtue of their culture. Not that they're trying, that it's being done for a particular, purpose, but it's a part of their culture. And then you have on top of that, where these policies coming from these top-down policies like the RED initiative of the United Nations, carbon credits where you have a marriage between Wall Street hedge funds, sovereign wealth funds in the United Arab Emirates, Qatar, all of them capturing credits from these local elites, these what Fanon called the national bourgeoisie, or what Sankara called the agents of neocolonialism, where they're selling off these credits to their own benefit, but while the environment continues to be destroyed. And that fortress conservation displaces the local population. So what we see, at play in the mining areas, in terms of the extractivism, in terms of the destruction, in terms of the displacement, in terms of the death, right, is also taking place in the rainforest, in the Congo Basin rainforest. So even though these two major issues, the transition, climate emergency, are central to the planet as a whole, we find that the Congo, which is so key to these dominant phenomena of the time, continues to pay dear price in terms of its environment being destroyed, in terms of its people being displaced, in terms of the hyper exploitation that we see, all in the name of a lot of it, not all, but a lot of it in the name of conservation, which Professor Sen rightly lays out in the term fortress conservation, which is basically another form of hypercapitalism, but in the forests of the Congo Basin in this particular case.
Oh, wow. Thank you guys so much for that. I guess you guys already touched on this, like how the Congo relates to climate change. So I'm going to go to the next question. What is the US when it comes to the Congolese people and the Congolese government? What is the Congo to the US, and what is it to colonize and oppress people here in the US? Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. It's kind of interesting. Each of these topics that you raised is just so filled with depth that we have to at least touch on. We can't do it all in this program, so that people understand the extent to which Congo itself, the heart of the African continent, is intertwined with U.S. policy, right? Particularly U.S. foreign policy, and I think that's so key for people to understand, and the destructive nature of it, right? The destructive nature of U.S. foreign policy in the Congo is such that even the most conservative, right, conservative of voices have to acknowledge it, right? It's not even debatable, right? The extent to which, even though through the U.S.'s own documents, right? In 2014, the State Department released declassified documents on U.S. covert action in the Congo from 1960 to 1967. And in those documents, it revealed that the U.S. covert action in the Congo was the largest covert action in the world at the time, on the part of the United States, right? And that covert action was to overthrow Congo's democratically elected prime minister, right? Patrice Emery Lumumba, which they're successful at doing. And even the chief of station of the CIA, Larry Devlin, he wrote a book about it, about how he overthrew Lumumba, right? In painstaking detail, how he corrupted the national bourgeoisie, the local elite, how he orchestrated the playing field in the Congo so that it would be one of extreme violence, right? And he lays it out in a book called Chief of Station Congo. I don't recommend you buy it, but you can get it from somewhere. So through their own documents, right, the United States reveal the destructive role that it has played. Now, those declassified documents that I mentioned in the State Department, there's a gentleman from the Council of Foreign Relations. If you know anything about the Council of Foreign Relations, you know it's an entity that provides the intellectual rationale for the empire, right? So it's a company, it's a part of the system. He wrote a book called The Lumumba Plot. And he had written an article in the Washington Post, I think around the fall of 2023, October or something of 2023. And in his article, he said that what we see in the Congo today is a direct result of US foreign policy from the 1960s. And he went on to say, in fact, Congolese deserve reparations for what the United States did, the destructive foreign policy in the Congo. He said, well, I don't believe that US will provide reparations, so maybe we can provide humanitarian aid in terms of education and health and so forth. So US foreign policy overthrowing Patrice Lumumba led to his assassination, and not just stopping there, right? But then the followers of Lumumba, the Lumumbas, after Lumumba was overthrown, tried to recapture the country. United States recruiting former Cuban pilots who Castro had kicked out of Cuba, and they were lodged in Miami, taking them to the Congo to fly flyer jets and drop bombs on Congolese who were trying to uphold the legal government of the Congo, right? And then on top of that, imposing a dictatorship over the Congolese people in Joseph Desiré Mobutu, but not stopping there, but maintaining that dictatorship so that when the resistance in the Congo rose up to remove Mobutu, the U.S. would send in, airplanes through Morocco and elsewhere, bombs on the resistance fighters. So, and in fact, that's why when Che Guevara went to the Congo in 1965, in his diaries, he said, Congo is the front lines of the anti-colonial battle, right? The Congo's problem is a worldwide problem. The extent to which Congo succeeds is the same extent to which Africa would succeed. The extent to which Congo fails is the same extent to which Africa fails, right? And we'll make the argument that the rationale that Che proffered in 1965, right, it obtains to this very day, right? In that Congo is the front lines of the battle against neocolonialism, against imperialism, right? Because of its strategic significance, not just because of its minerals, but its location, its size, a whole bunch of reasons, right? So that maintenance of that dictatorship for over 3 decades, right, has produced what we see in the Congo today. So from the United States being the first country to recognize Congo under the ownership of King Leopold II in 1884, to the overthrow of Lumumba and the installation of Mobutu, right up to the backing of a 30-year war of aggression and plunder by two major agents of neocolonialism on the continent, Paul Kagame of Rwanda and Yoweri Museveni of Uganda. The U.S. has been deeply implicated in what we see unfolding in the Congo today, which should make everyone question this minerals for security deal that the Trump administration is proffering, where he says he's bringing peace to the Congo, which is a whole nother chapter. I don't know, I think there may be a few questions to deal with that, but I'll leave it at that right there for now.
Okay, I just want to attach to what Brother Maurice was saying, again, in 100% agreement with his assessment and explanation. What we also have to pay attention to is, because we're very clear on the weapons, strategy, and tactics of U.S. imperialism, but one of their extremely effective weapons is Black celebrity. Whether you go back to Kermit Roosevelt and the insertion of Louis Armstrong, who was probably the most famous and popular international Black star of his era, and how he was utilized as a quote unquote, I don't know, they gave him an ambassador, a cultural ambassador, that they had him provide Louis Armstrong to provide cover for the coup d'etat in the Congo. And then you come up to the modern contemporary era and you look at They Not Like Us, Kendrick Lamar, and his celebrated concert in Rwanda to bring legitimacy and affection for Africans across the globe for the Rwanda regime, as he correctly pointed out, that they're one of the most vicious, bloodthirsty agents of Western imperialism, and Kagame himself and his lackeys are being well compensated for their atrocities and treason against African people in the Congo specifically. And even our beloved Chuck D of Public Enemy has become a ambassador and been given cultural ambassador status. So we're very aware of the CIA agent and the weapons dealer and other third parties that provide plausible deniability for the U.S. hand in the atrocities in the Congo. But we also have to be very aware of the traitors from within our community and our culture, because celebrity culture and Black celebrities, A-list Black celebrities, have long been assets of the government and the assets, because Black culture in the U.S. is universal. It goes across the world, and the affection that Africa has for the African diaspora, particularly U.S. or Black American artists, allows for them to be used against our people's interests at home and abroad. But specifically, the Congo Black celebrity has been weaponized against African people.
No, I loved everything of like what you guys were saying. And Diallo, I remember watching Congo Unfiltered on the Friends of Congo YouTube, and I don't know his name, but he's talking about like how like the NBA is also taking part in like the Rwanda and everything, and I was like, whoa, this is like so like crazy.
Yeah, I mean, these Black celebrities. We have to understand that a celebrity is not defined by being very talented in ball chasing or rapping and singing. A celebrity is an individual who is an embodiment of the aspirations of that society or culture. I think the Kardashians probably demonstrate best that celebrity has nothing to do with any particular talent, aside from them being able to embody the aspirations, the material aspirations of the society they live in. So these Black celebrities are Pied Pipers of capitalism, by and large. And we have a lot of talent, and that's much different than an artist. You know, I know several artists from the African continent in the US that are revolutionary artists, conscious artists. We have scholars who are artists as well, and artists who are scholars. So I'm not tearing down athletes. I'm not tearing down artists. But we have to start to make a strict cultural distinction between minstrels and ball chasers and artists and athletes. Muhammad Ali was an athlete, you know. Wise, intelligent, a poor, righteous teacher. He's an artist. Whereas these minstrel people who, you know, literally dance for tokens and become tokens themselves, I think that they get let off the hook in history because they don't tote guns. We have so much affection for them, but the State Department, the CIA are very aware of the power of African American culture, our swagger, and they use them as gateways into the African continent since the era, the post-colonial or neo-colonial era began.
Yeah, when Sister Nzinga, you talked about the NBA. Wanted to touch up on that a little bit, especially around the question of sports washing, but also for to take it back a bit in terms of how the empire works. This is Harvard professor by the name of Joseph Nye, who laid out a theory around power and domination, right? And he divided the power into two categories. So he talks about hard power and soft power as means of domination, right? And of course, the hard power is evident. We're talking about, you know, military, right? Soft power is that culture, right? The music and the sports and the entertainment, the non-governmental organizations, right? Those are all forms or instruments that the empire utilizes in order to pursue its interests. And of course, the dominant interest is full spectrum domination across the board, right? Unchallenged. So for folks that, as we look at this, that's the lens in which we should look through, right? So for example, we're talking about Paul Kagame of Rwanda. The US uses its culture as well, but you also have European powers that do the same, right? So you have, for example, the British, they have the British Commonwealth, right? Which is promote British culture. You have the French, Francophonie, and promote French culture. And the head of the Francophonie today, the Secretary General of the Francophonie, is Rwanda's Louise Mushikiwabo, right? Her former foreign minister, who Paul Kagame lobbied Macron to ensure that Rwanda would be at the head of the Francophonie as Secretary General, right? I know Rwanda is always often put forward, and Kagame by some young Africans as, you know, being a Pan-Africanist and a model for folks to follow. But if you look, for example, at the Alliance of Sahel states, you know, Traores of Burkina Faso, or Goita of Mali, or Chiani of Niger, they're not looking to get up into the Francophone. They're saying, French, get out. You've been robbing us. You've been stealing our resources. We want to be the beneficiaries. So put those two up, you know, one that's the Alliance of Sahel states and Kagame, and you make a choice. So that's just as talking about usage of soft power. With the NBA, and it's under the banner of sports washing. That's where a country leadership, they may commit crimes within their own country, war crimes, crimes against humanity, mass crimes, in neighboring countries like Rwanda does in the Congo, Uganda does in the Congo. And what they do is they attach themselves to popular items, entertainers, musicians, sports teams, in order to cleanse their image. So when you look at Rwanda, for example, and it says on the Arsenal football team, visit Rwanda, be like, Arsenal is like, okay, they're sports, they're fun. You know, they wouldn't be in bed with someone who the United Nations says that if his soldiers are brought in front of a competent court, could be brought up for charges of genocide, right? So sports washing is where, not just Rwanda, Israel, United Arab Emirates. You just talk to the Sudanese brothers and sisters. They'll tell you the extent to which sports washing is taking place among the UAE, right? Qatar, all of them. In Rwanda in particular, they have sponsorship with football teams like Arsenal in the UK and Paris Saint-Germain in France, Bayern in Germany, right? And in the United States, they have deep ties with the NBA. The NBA launched the Africa League, right, from Rwanda. And spearheading that is Masai Ujiri, the former president, the Nigerian brother of the Toronto Raptors. So Kagame has been able to use the NBA as a cover. That's what prompted even ESPN. It's not ESPN is not most a radical media entity, right? But they dove into it. They posed these questions to the leadership of the NBA, to Masari. Masari, declined to be on camera, to be interviewed by them. But they asked them, questions. Rwanda and Uganda, Rwanda in particular, waged a 3-decade war of aggression and plunder against the Congo. This year alone, they occupied 2 major cities, invaded and occupied 2 major cities in the east of the Congo, which is still under occupation. And even the United Nations at the Security Council, Resolution 2773 in February 21st voted unanimously that Rwanda needed to get out of the Congo without any conditions, without preconditions, and cut its tie with the M23 militia that it has operation and command over. So you have the NBA that's in bed with really this the crimes that are being committed in the Congo. They're complicit in that sense. And it's not just the NBA and it's just that Missouri, but you also have President Obama, who's vested. He's an investor, right, in the NBA Africa League, right? So you have these investors. You have the entertainers that Diallo talked about, Kendrick Lamar, Dave Chappelle, right? John Legend. We had mounted a campaign this year to pressure John Legend to do what Tims of Nigeria did. Tims of Nigeria saw what was happening in the Congo and Rwanda's handprints all over it. She said, I'm not going to perform in Rwanda, right? But John Legend did. I think, is Legend out of Chicago? I don't know. He's right. Or in New York. He's around here somewhere. But he went anyways, right? But the thing is, because of the pressure, and this is start to get into the prescriptions, because of the pressure from people on social media and elsewhere, he had to respond. He wound up going, but he had to defend it. And it was a very weak defense, right? He's like, I didn't want to rob the Rwandan people of, the opportunity to engage in, in this entertainment. So he was putting it on the Rwandan people. But that accrues to the benefit of Paul Kagame when he hobnobs with these folks. And then because he's talking about these popular figures, and the popular of him, he's a good guy. Not that he's complicit, right, in ravaging the Congo, where you have millions of Congolese have perished as a result of successive wars of invasion and occupation and plunder. And one is ongoing right now as we speak, where the east of the Congo, the bulk of it is occupied by Rwanda and its M23 militia. So the Los Angeles, or the Los Angeles, the basketball team, Clippers, right, just entered into an agreement with Kagame. The Rams just entered an agreement with Kagame. So we have to keep the pressure on our folks in the Bay Area this year, in San Francisco, Oakland, was out front. The NBA All-Star game that was held in San Francisco, protesting, handing out leaflets, letting people know that the NBA is in bed with a leader who is killing Africans. Because that's what he's doing. He's killing Africans in the Congo. That's what he's doing. That's what he's done for the past 30 years. And he's been able to get away with it because of his relationship with the empires, the likes of Bill Clinton, Tony Blair, Benjamin Netanyahu, right? And he's able to get away with it because he's the classic agent. When Netanyahu, Israel wanted to get rid of its asylees and deport people, Kagame said, bring them to Rwanda, we'll take it. Boris Johnson wanted to do the same in England. Kagame says, bring them to Rwanda. They got $200 million. The courts in England had to intervene to stop the deportation process. When Donald Trump steps up and say, hey, we're sending folks to El Salvador, we want to send them to Africa, Kagame say yes. So Trump sent an Iraqi to Rwanda already. And then they're lined up to take on more deportees and asylees that Trump is, they're working out deals that Trump will send to Rwanda. So, when Macron says that, hey, our company, the company Total Energies, the interests are threatened in Cabo Delgado in Mozambique, Kagame said, we'll offer as soldiers and mercenaries to go and clamp down on whatever uprising is taking place in Mozambique. We'll clamp down on them in the interests of Total Energies, right? And then Kagame is compensated by the European Union 20 million euros in 2023, another 20 million euros in 2024. So they are part of the system and destructive, right? Not only to the Congo, but really to the future of the African continent. That is, if you believe that Congo is central to the future of the United States as Africa, as Kwame Nkrumah laid out in his book, The Challenge of the Congo.
Yeah, and I think it should be pointed out, if you follow Rwanda and Kagame on social media, Kagame is seen as having some of the most pro-African rhetoric and some of the most anti-Western rhetoric in asserting Africa's power and independence. Is no different than Mobutu, Joseph. But Mobutu, many of these African sellouts have some of the most militant PR as being champions of Africa, African power, and African independence as they sell us out. They when they are behind a podium, they're some of the most powerful Black figures, and when they're at the negotiating table, they're some of the weakest and biggest sellouts we've ever produced.
Wow. Wild. Okay. So we have 6 minutes until we have people answering questions. Let's just I was gonna ask about the US peace deal, but I think that was already touched on. Could you speak on what can those of us in attendance today do to advocate for sustained action and solidarity with Congolese people moving forward? And what does accountability look like for Western corporations who profit off of the exploitation of Congo for the global supply chain?
In terms of, I'll start with the corporations. They're not legitimate entities. They're unfit to rule, and their very existence and the very concept of an LLC. So more so than trying to compel an entity, there's a great documentary accompanied by a text called The Corporations. And corporations are essentially psychopathic entities. Because I'm sure everyone's aware of corporate personhood, that the multinational corporations have benefited from protections defined in the Constitution that were offered for emancipated slaves, the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments. So corporate entities have the same rights as persons to own property, to sue for grievances, and all other benefits afforded to an individual. These immortal, immensely wealthy persons, it is an illegitimate. So as far as trying to appeal for a corporation to do good under capitalism and the reality of capitalism, any corporation doing good becomes extinct or becomes absorbed by corporations that are acting according to the nature, which is the purpose of a corporation is to concentrate wealth for the shareholders. That's it. There's no other purpose. I think Ford said it best. That Nazi said that I'm not into manufacturing cars. I'm in business to generate profit. So the notion that we can compel a corporation to be a good actor, or this mythology or fallacy of good corporate personship. So I think that our approach to corporations should be one through sanction, subversion, and dismantling. And corporations should know that as we target them, it's not to compel you to behave, but it's to compel you to cease your existence, to relinquish control of the means of production, to secure ownership by the labor force and just practices. But corporations can't. I mean, we have over 200 years of the existence of limited liability corporations. And as corporations have grown in power, so it has intensified the oppression and weakness. So there are things we can do as communities to subvert the harm they do within our communities: pollution, extraction, labor practices, compensation, wages. But internationally, it should be the same. I think the goal should be subversion and sanction, not so much compelling them to do right, but by nature, they can't do right. And even when they institute policies, whether it's DEI or commitments to sustainability, that's what Del Jones called loosening up to get a tighter grip. Loosening up to get a tighter grip. Corporations cannot be reformed. Capitalism cannot function any other way than as it does, because the moment it seeks the hyper exploitation, hyper extraction, and hyper concentration, it's no longer capitalism. So reform, seeking justice, even seeking remedies from these entities that don't exist for that. So I would say that we should be organizing to subvert corporate power, not to compel corporate power to be better.
The corporations, you know, it's kind of interesting. We often get friends in the Congo when we deal with the questions of corporations, all up and down the supply chain in the Congo. One thing that jumps out for us is an interview that the current Secretary General of the United Nations, Antonio Guterres, gave to the Financial Times in 2008, before he became Secretary General. And he said something that struck us. He said, you know, let us not forget that the international community had systematically looted the Congo, right? He said the international community has systematically looted the Congo. Of course, he could have added for the past 125 years, right? He did the interview in 2008. And we concur with that diagnosis, right? He didn't say, well, Apple has systematically looted the Congo. He didn't say, well, the tech sector has systematically looted the Congo. He didn't say, well, Tesla has systematically looted the Congo. Or the auto sector has systematically looted the Congo. He said the international community, right, has systematically looted the Congo. And that's a diagnosis. So if that's a diagnosis, that the international community has systematically looted the Congo, then what is the prescription? How do you respond to the systemic and structural looting of the Congo, right? Certainly, buying refurbished phones, ceasing to vape is not going to, put a dent in any of that, right? So that means the response, at the very least, we got to make an attempt to ensure that the response is systemic in nature, right? So the looting in the current state, I think, is so critical for us, in terms of our political education or popular education, to lean on Kwame Nkrumah and his theory of neocolonialism, right? In fact, he wrote the book, Neocolonialism, the Latest Stage of Imperialism, right? It is from Nkrumah that we have this this tool, this instrument, in order for us to make not only proper analysis, but come up with prescriptions that are enduring. In his book, like the two dominant corporations he looked at, was Anglo American out of South Africa and Union Miniere out of the Congo, right? And he talked about the leaders, the political leaders, basically just having appearances of control and power, but it's these corporations and those who control the economy who dominate, right? So what you have in the Congo is that same national bourgeoisie, or some would call them the comprador class, who sell out, the Congolese for pennies on the dollar. And they're able to do that not only because of the support that they have from international finance capital, but also because of I saw a question in the chat, the weakness of the resistance, right? On the part of the people. So one of the prescriptions, we believe is the ultimate, part of the ultimate solution, is how can we be in solidarity with those who are resisting at the local level, to strengthen them in a way that they can be empowered, right? Either to do what we see occurring in the Alliance of Sahel states, or to hold, be a strong enough pressure on their comprador class, or to just outright produce their own leadership. That's where we see the enduring solution. And part of it is first knowing that they exist, because often we talk about Congo, like there are no Congolese there. There are no Congolese resisting. There are no Congolese organizing. There are no Congolese involved in movement building, right? Whenever anybody talks about the Congo, we all should ask, who are the Congolese that are organizing on the front lines in the mines? What organizations and formations are in, the east of the country, or in indigenous communities in rainforests, or in urban areas? Like, we should be asking folks when they're saying that, this and that is happening in the Congo. Who are those Congolese on the front lines who are organizing, right? That's why when people ask, we said, well, the Bassandra Coalition, they're organizing. That's one formation that we work with that's organizing. They're organizing in the rainforest, in the east of the country, in the mining areas, in the urban areas, right? They have a reach of about 2 million people. So it's vital that we recognize the agency, that Congolese are not just sitting by, sitting still and just being victims, right? There is resistance. It's just that they have enormous forces against them. Guterres said the international community, it's the international community that's against the Congolese people. They're local elites, one. Neighboring countries like the Kagames and Museveni, two, right? Foreign governments, UK, United States, European Union, France, three, right? Multinational organizations from the bottom to the top, right? The Glencores right up to Apples and Tesla, right? Multilateral institutions, World Bank, IMF. World Bank wrote the mining laws for the Congo in the interest of private capital, right? So the Congolese people have all of these forces arrayed against them. So it's up to us, the people, to be by the side of those on the front lines who are organizing for change in the country. Now, that's where we see that the bulk of the energy and focus ought to be. We've collaborated with, like, for example, attorney Terry Collingsworth, international rights advocates, who brought a lawsuit against 5 tech companies, Tesla, Apple, Microsoft, Dell, Google. A legal battle is important. So utilize all the tools at one's disposal. However, it's so key for us to be clear about what the pursuit is. Dr. George Nzangola lays it out in his book, From Leopold to Kabila, People's History. The pursuit of the Congolese, dating back hundreds of years, is to control and determine their own affairs. In modern day talk, that means resource sovereignty, to control the land, to control the resources, to control the wealth, to control their own affairs, to control their own means of production, right? That's the pursuit. And then when you see that that's a pursuit, then you get a sense of what the strategies that are needed in order to bring about that reality. So, but for right now, in terms of solidarity, we certainly ought to be seeking out, those who are on the front lines organizing for that pursuit. What Patrice Lumumba said when he formed the Congolese National Movement, the MNC, in 1958, he said, "Comrades, we're here for one reason primarily: a free Congo." Right?
Thank you guys for those. We're gonna open it up for participants questions. If folks can either ask their questions in the chat or raise your hand, and we can like choose you, and you can hop off like mute.
Azir, you might want to check your chat. I think you got one question in there. So I'm still waiting for the others.
Okay. Yeah. So Liberation for the Congo asked, what is the state of liberation or resistance movements and parties in the Congo? Is there any organizing on the ground towards Pan-African scientific socialism? I feel like you kind of went over that, but
That's a question for me.
yeah, anyone, yeah.
Oh yeah, there are a number of young people who are organizing in that space, right? And building with other Africans who are the same ideological bent, whether it's in South Africa or in Ghana. So they're youth groups who are primarily youth groups in Kinshasa who embrace that. And people can hit me up after I can connect them with some of them, and put my email in the chat. And if they want to be in communication with them, we can make that happen.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I don't know if Nadami, if you have like the email for Friends of the Congo, I can also bring that up real quick.
It's already in the chat.
Oh, perfect. Cool. Do other folks have any other questions for the panelists? Okay, yeah. Someone asked, can you talk more about the history of resistance in the Congo? That's a lot. Yeah.
Is that contemporary resistance or historic resistance?
Serene?
Or let me just say a few things that may be a particular interest. Africans in the United States have been deeply implicated in the resistance in the Congo, right? Of course, you've had resistance dating back to the period of enslavement. Sister Kimpa Vita, who they call the Joan of Arc of Portuguese rule in the Congo, right up to particularly interesting figures, Simon Kimbangu at the dawn of the 20th century, who resisted Belgian colonialism, who himself was a Garveyite in the sense that he had access to Garvey's literature through Black missionaries who'd go to Congo in the early 1900s. Simon Kimbangu himself, he spent more time in jail than Nelson Mandela for sedition, resisting Belgian colonialism, right? those are some of the figures, the towering figures in Congo that represents a resistance. Professor Nzongolo's book, the Congo from Leopold to Kabila, People's History, documents Congolese resistance since Congo was turned over to the Belgian state when it was taken away from King Leopold II in 1908. That's an excellent source to get more information around that. But what is a particularly interesting point of note to us is the role that Africans here, you had figures like George Washington Williams, who fought in the Civil War in the United States. He was a Civil War hero. Some people refer to him as the first African-American historian of note, who came out of the Civil War, served as an elected official in Ohio, went to Howard University. John Hope Franklin wrote a really good book on him called The Biography of George Washington Williams. He said, well, I want to see what's going down in the Congo. King Leopold said he's on a civilizing mission there. Let me see. He went there in 1890, and he said, what I've observed is tantamount to crimes against humanity that's unfolding. Everything but, a civilizing mission. You had figures like William Shepard and his wife Lucy Gant, who documented the atrocities that are being committed in the Congo. So you had Africans here, no Twitter, no Instagram, in the late 1800s, being in solidarity with Congolese resistance organizers against the ownership of King Leopold, against Belgian colonialism, and even right up to when Lumumba came to the United States. He came to bring us back. And one young, remarkable woman responded, as a college student by the name of Dr. Yvonne Sion. She went back and to work with the Congo. So the resistance has existed, major resistance figures in the Congo, but also important for us in terms of solidarity, that we've joined in solidarity with them. And probably the biggest supporter of Congolese resistance, in the past 50 years or so, one of the biggest anyways, is notwithstanding Ilambe Brath of the Patrice Lumumba Coalition, is Malcolm X himself, who was a staunch supporter of the resistance fighters in the Congo, and certainly of Lumumba himself.
I mean, I think absolutely. I don't think that you can identify a Black liberation-oriented or Black power-oriented individual organization in the past half century or more that hasn't taken a stance of solidarity and support for the struggles of the Congo. I don't think you can identify a radical scholar, Professor William Mackey, of course, the icons of Dr. Clark, or Dr. John Clark, Dr. Joseph Ben-Yakin. So just as Haiti and the Congo have been mythological places almost in the development of African people's consciousness, of the great kingdoms, the great empires of African antiquity, and symbols of resistance and solidarity. So I've been in organizing, and I've been in the Black liberation movement since I was 14 years old, and I've yet to come across a legitimate liberation organization or a legitimate Black figure who hasn't stood in staunch solidarity and support with the Congo. So the Congo is kind of a beacon of Pan-African consciousness and Pan-African resistance. Sorry about that.
No, you're fine, and I definitely agree with that for sure. Thank you guys for that. I'm gonna see if there's any.
Sorry, can I ask how much more time?
We have 14 minutes.
Okay, yeah, because I'm running a little short. So, okay.
Okay. I'm sorry.
No, it's not my fault. I'm so happy. I appreciate you guys have been very accommodating. It's on me.
Okay. Yeah. Someone asks, is there any connection to young people resisting in Kenya? somebody wanna answer that?
I haven't seen any. You know, I haven't seen any direct links yet. It's kind of interesting. Those militia groups that are backed by Rwanda, they somehow wound up in Nairobi and announced themselves in Kenya, under the auspices of William Ruto. If you know anything about William Ruto, there's a reason, of course, why the young Kenyans are resisting Ruto, right? No problem, no problem. So there have been collaborations with young people in West Africa, going back a decade or so. The young folks who organized in Burkina Faso to chase Blaise Compaoré, young folks who organized in Senegal to block Abdoulaye Wade, I think it was 2011 or so, from standing and staying in power. So there have been some solidarity efforts. Those haven't been the most radical forms because although they're organized to chase the agents of neocolonialism, those formations weren't necessarily anti-imperialist, which you see them, coming into clash today with some of the more radical forms of Pan-Africanism in West Africa. But those links did exist at the time.
Yeah, that is interesting. Do you have okay. Oh wow. I'm
Yeah.
gonna
So I'm looking at the chat. There's not really many questions. So
Uh,
we're going to-
there's one that just came up. As large scale protests erupted in the response to the genocide in Palestine, it seems that the slogans like "Free Congo" and "Free Sudan" became more visible than before, at least from what I've witnessed. Over the past 2 years of the genocide, have you noticed any shifts in solidarity with Congo? Want to hear how you personally feel about it, if you can share.
Well, there's a very sick instance in Western system. Capitalism and white hegemony has ongoing genocide in every populated landmass on this planet. It is funding, provoking, covering, justifying, arming atrocities on a daily basis. And because the human mind is not able to really comprehend atrocities on that scale, especially empathetic and humane people, we engage in what I call atrocity hopping. So there will be there are many people who weren't even aware of the atrocities in Palestine prior to October of last year, and or think that this is the not necessarily the beginning, but this intensification. If just a decade or so ago, you had the Darfur region, where everyone was talking about the Janjaweed militias and the Darfur, and this is an ongoing right now in that same region, and many of the same actors are creating the largest man-made famine on the face of the earth right now. I went to a Friends of the Congo and BDS solidarity march here in Chicago earlier last year, in the spring of last year. We staged a protest outside of the huge Apple store on North Avenue here in Chicago, and they had speakers coming from Oklahoma. And I remember in high school, I was in the Lakota Nation because the U.S. government was still attacking the American Indian movement in Leavenworth, Kansas. They still had the political prisoner Leonard Peltier, and it was ironic to me that white Americans were flying from the Midwest and literally flying in from Indian country to protest atrocities and genocide in Palestine. They were literally flying over genocide to go protest the genocide. So it is curious and upsetting, but I do understand it, how certain genocides in certain regions become the genocide du jour, the genocide of the hour, the atrocity of the hour that we create movements around, hashtags around, and even some companies will begin to express sympathies, or the government, like you have a fascist regime like the MAGA Trump nation even claim we're going to bring peace or ceasefires to these things. But the fundamental issue and the fundamental reality is justice is not profitable. Justice erodes the legitimacy of empire. So whichever genocide is brought to the fore, because the US corporate media couldn't cover right now in Latin America. There are death squads entering the rainforest to wipe out the indigenous people. The indigenous people of Central America and South America are still being slaughtered by the descendants of conquistadors. And we just kind of group them all together as brown people or Latinos or Hispanics, these titles. So the reality is, on every populated landmass, there are grievous injustices. And even if we are able to bring some relief or some awareness to certain people, that just allows them to intensify. As focus goes to Palestine, they can intensify in the Sudan, or act with impunity in Sudan. As attention goes to the Sudan, that it opens them up, it's drawn away from. So the real focus needs to be on capitalism and white hegemony. And it is good to, if the Congo is your motivation to say, hey, the way the world is oriented, the way power is executed and controlled and centralized is a problem. But ultimately, that's why we had, as the brother Maurice said, education. And a true education given to a humane person is going to radicalize them. So our movement, this genocide is a byproduct of capitalism and white hegemony. Resource extraction and theft is a byproduct of capitalism and white hegemony. We have to dismantle the infrastructure and institutions of capitalism and white hegemony. As we bring relief to and get aid and support and raise awareness to these various atrocities that are the byproduct of this central issue that is destroying the life-sustaining capacity of the earth.
I think we're in a moment where there's a lot of possibilities at hand, especially with the younger generation, the Gen Zs and the millennials, right? In that they're getting they're getting education themselves to see how the corporate media operates and works on the side of the global elites in order to shroud or cover for genocides that are occurring in the world. So the youth that we've engaged and worked with, they're firmly ensconced in the notion of collective liberation, right? There's so many young Palestinian organizers we work with that they create space for the Congo, to the point where we often talk of a pre-October 7th organizing around the Congo and a post-October 7th, right? Where the engagement, people who genuinely want to learn, right? Because they just don't understand. They hear about what's going on, they don't understand, but genuinely want to learn, definitely uptick. Genuinely want to support, definitely uptick. Genuinely want to create space. Done more forums with Palestinians and Sudanese, Haitians, post-October 7th than we've done probably through the entire pre-October 7th period. So we're latching on to that, especially among the younger generation, and who are using social media as a point of entry. And it is just that. It's so important for us to share with them that, Instagram and the TikTok are points of entry. You have to deal with the material, right? You have to read the Nkrumahs, you have to read the Fanons, you have to listen to Malcolm's speeches, right? You have to read Andre Blouin's, and good to see folks, even though it's in our sister's transition, folks reading Asada. So we can see what our freedom fighters have done before, so that we can, draw from their experience, right? I think Malcolm in the Nation of Islam said it best. He said, of all our studies, history is best qualified to reward our research. So it's an opportunity. Maybe, I don't know if I'm too optimistic, but I'm certainly optimistic of the level of engagement that we're seeing, and the willingness for these young folks to want to be more educated, more informed, more engaged across the board, in the rubric of, this is about collective liberation. This is about collective resistance, to the empire. So I'm very optimistic in that regard.
Thank you guys so much. We have 2 minutes, so we're gonna close it with some closing remarks. Anything that you guys want to say to the
check 1 2 check.
Huh? Yeah.
Wait, finish. Finish what you finish. If you finish,
I'm sorry, you said closing remarks?
Yeah, like anything that you guys want to like uplift, like any resources or anything like that, like anything that you want to like.
Oh, check in with Friends of the Congo. I heard when you guys had a representative with Friends of the Congo here, I was like, well, what y'all need me for? Because, as far as the Congo, I've had them on my own channel, and just a thorough, comprehensive analysis of the situation and offering viable solutions. So I want to give respect and shout out to Friends of the Congo. You can reach me at Diallo Kenyatta across the socials, or at AfricanWorldOrder.com if you want to kind of plug in with some of the efforts that I have going on out of Chicago and related to the struggle and revolutionary Pan-Africanism and scientific socialism. That's what we have to construct and bring about for our total and permanent liberation.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much. This is amazing, Baba Diallo and y'all inviting us to be a part of this discussion, this grounding. Always glad to engage when we talk about liberation for our people, whether it's at home or abroad. There are a few things I would suggest for folks. We still have Congo Week going on. It's a global week of learning and action. It's an opportunity for people to be in solidarity with folks on the front lines. If they're following our platforms, before we started this discussion, they're able to engage with young organizers, indigenous leaders who are in the heart of the rainforest. We're on talking about the movement building and the organizing that they're doing deep in Congo's rainforest. What we're clear about and like to share with everybody is that ultimately the solutions are going to come from those folks, those young people who are on the front lines. How we show up can complement what they're doing, can boost what they're doing, can accelerate what they're doing. But we don't have to show up with answers. They already have the answers. So what we have to show up with is, how do we best be in solidarity with them? So in that spirit, we encourage you to join Friends of the Congo in being solidarity with them, really in the spirit of Lumumba. In his last letter to his wife, Pauline, before he was assassinated, Lumumba left a message for the Congolese people. And he said to the Congolese people, he said, we're not alone, right? He said, we're not alone. Africa, Asia, free and liberated people from every corner of the world will be found by the side of the Congolese, right? That's what Diallo talked about before. He said he didn't need a radical Pan-African institution that wasn't by the side of the Congolese, right? So Lumumba left us that message, and to complement it so that we're absolutely clear, Frantz Fanon in Toward the African Revolution said, let us not forget the fate of all of us is at stake in the Congo. So we encourage people to take the words of those two giant figures in mind and join this movement for free and liberated Congo. Go to freecongo.org. The moment you get on freecongo.org, you can support a humanitarian effort that's being led by Congolese on the front lines. You have an option to put pressure on politicians and corporations. You can join the movement to bring your skills, your talents, your expertise, your network, your resources to bear upon the movement building that's taking place on the front lines. So highly recommend, go to freecongo.org, hit us up on the social media, the Instagram and the X and Facebook, YouTube, just at Congo Friends on these platforms so that you can be fully engaged as we wrap up Congo Week. Even as I speak to you right now, we have some young hip hop artists in Washington, D.C., just down the road, Adams Morgan. They brought they're just like off the charts, right? With their rap and the ciphers, the whole bit. And they're doing it in solidarity with their brothers and sisters in the Congo. Benefit effort, and not to be outdone by the younger generation. Next, on the November 2nd, Sunday, November 2nd, we have the likes of Ayana Gregory, Sweet Honey on the Rock. We have Anamo Larango, just a host of remarkable entertainers, performers, singers, Free Benjamin, coming together in love sound for the Congo. So just go on Eventbrite, just type in Love Sound Congo. And if you're in DC, just come in and support the sisters as they're standing in solidarity with women on the front lines in the Congo. So there's plenty of action. It doesn't matter what field you're in, plenty of opportunity for you to use your talents, your skills, your expertise, your resources, your network to bring to bear on this dignified struggle for peace, justice, and sovereignty in the heart of the African continent. And when it's achieved, it will not only be beneficial to Congolese, but to the African continent as a whole and the global African family. So your interest and your fate, as Fanon says, is definitely at stake in the Congo.
Wow, beautiful. This was really wonderful. Thank you guys so much. Thank you to all of the people that came out. I'm going to now close out the Zoom, actually, and you guys are going to get a follow-up email, like the folks who have attended and the folks who registered, the recording, the resources that were talked about today, and also Maurice, Friends of the Congo and Diallo's contact information. Thank you guys so much, and you guys have a wonderful evening. The recording has stopped.
Thank you, Sister Nzinga. Thank you so much. That was amazing.